My daughter is in the hospital, so I told my wife we need to get on the first plane right now and fly and go take care of her. But my wife starts throwing this tantrum in the middle of the airport because she didn't want to go. So this is what I decide to do. Good morning, afternoon, evening, night, or whatever time of day you're reading this. My story may upset you a bit because of the questionable decision-making I've made, but I feel it's the best thing for everybody, at least until I can think of a solution for everybody to be in holy peace. My story begins years ago, when I had my daughter Angie with my college sweetheart. However, my girlfriend, she passed away in childbirth, as she was very small in stature and Angie was a big baby, so there were complications. It was a heartbreaking time that I was barely able to come to terms with a few years ago, when I decided it was time to get over it. Believe me, it wasn't easy. We're talking about a 25-year-old starting to raise a baby alone, and although I had the help of mother and grandmother, the biggest workload was on me having to work every day to be able to bring food to my daughter's plate. My mother was very critical about the pregnancy, but seeing that I was determined, she began to help me. And so began my single dad story with Angie. She was, thankfully, an exemplary baby. Smart like no other and quite an artist. She even got to teach her other classmates in math during 3rd grade. She was one of the high scorers and had no problem helping them with the projects, but she was the kind of student who went out of her way to help others learn and not just pass homework for the sake of passing it. Of course, I had complications raising her as she transitioned to the college stage. Nowadays, I talk about the most normal things, but those were rough years where I spent sleepless nights learning and talking to her about everything. I always told myself that it would all be worth it someday, and it's very easy to tell you that at this point in my life, but a girl must always have a female figure in her life. She had that with my mom and grandmother, only, there were things that they could not fully assimilate because of the generation gap. In itself, the only thing that mattered was the fact that I went out of my way for that little girl. I spoiled her, gave her what she asked for, and even learned about her likes and dislikes so that I could better socialize in her changing stages. As I told you, this period was hard for me because I had to give up dates, trips, or meet other people to dedicate myself exclusively to Angie. Oddly enough, having a daughter kept me so distracted that I didn't even have time to think about dating anybody else. Between Angie and work, I sometimes had to go to the bathroom. Eventually, and thanks to a few sessions of psychological therapy, which I recommend to everybody, whether they're doing good or poorly in life, I was finally able to get rid of several burdens I had, such as blaming myself for my girlfriend's death when in fact it was both of our decisions to have Angie. I thought it would be irresponsible to date somebody else, but let's face it. A 30-something-year-old guy who does not think about dating other women, well, it's not that common. I felt a little weird when I downloaded one of those apps to meet people, but I'm not going to detail the things I went through with that. Rather, I'll get to the part where I finally met somebody who looked like she might be worth it. Mera. Mera is beautiful. Smart and a shark for business. She's the kind of person who can take a business from 0 to 100 in a matter of a few months. Well, she worked in digital marketing and has had hundreds of jobs in the area, managing to perform like a fish in water. I won't say that when we met it was exactly love at first sight, but it was the start of something pretty big. I met her when Angie was already 15, and yeah, I know it sounds a bit off and far from what I could have enjoyed, but as I say, all that time was worth it. We went out a couple times and the conversation was quite pleasant and we hit it off instantly. What I liked most about her was her ability to be independent, since that told me that she wasn't going to be meddling in things that I might have with Angie. I revealed to her right off the bat that I had a daughter, as I felt it was the right thing to do. And she did not seem to mind, although I did notice her a little tense when she found out that Angie was already 15. She's very much of the mindset that teenagers are irrational beings that you can barely talk to. Mera started to be a little more involved in my life after the 5th date, and it was on the 6th date that she met Angie. Sure, it was all roses at first, but As my relationship progressed, the truth is that the tension between the two of them became more and more noticeable. Angie, indeed, can be a pain in the butt because of her adolescence, but Mera did not make the whole thing easy. We all felt that she was the stereotypical case of the evil stepmother. Angie was the one who started the conflict by also having the idea that stepmothers could become irrational beings with whom you could only argue. I was with two old-fashioned ones, I guess. Of course, I mentioned the stepmom thing ahead of time, because in just a few couple years later, I was already proposing to Mera, much to Angie's disappointment. She was giving me silent threats that showed her annoyance about the decision, but I knew it was also because of the sense of, quote, "She's not my real mother, she's an interloper," which could indicate a lack of female figure in her childhood, and the very thing she was trying to avoid. It took time for us to get used to it, but we managed to cope with living together as best as we could, just not the way that I wanted to. I say this because they preferred not to talk to each other, because every time someone asked the slightest, "How was your day?" the other would go into an almost abnormal state of aggression, and in the middle of it all, there was me. Many people tell me that I should have chosen my daughter over Mera, but it was difficult because I was comfortable with her and I had the mentality that I would not find somebody who would empathize with me in the same way that she did. I know, it's somewhat pathetic, but I ask that you put yourself in my position for a moment and you'll understand that all I wanted was a decent family role model, although that may also, on the side of pathetic. In itself, things were tense for a few years, at least until Angie was able to leave for college, and hey, that's a whole nother story. Living together was hostile, yes, but at least with classes and work, there ended up being a few times that we all just interacted together. None of them had a problem sharing me, depending on the occasion. If it was a school event, I would go with Angie, but if it was something fancier, I would go with Mera. It was kind of a given. And that's how we managed to stay until it was time to think about college. It was then that Mera began to take more dominant actions, feeling that Angie should become more independent. This was somewhat uncomfortable since she was going through a kind of internal conflict, because she did not know what to study. She wanted education, accounting, law, or engineering, though. But we saw our solution within an out-of-state university. There were a variety of options, of course, so Angie began researching until she found the one that she wanted. Of course, it would be a little complicated because of money, but in a way, Mera also helped us a little there, even though I knew that deep down it was just to get rid of seeing Angie every day. So, with a lot of pain and regret, we started the preparations for her going to the other state. We looked for residency, and she finally decided on a career, and we met people in the area, and we believed that she could adapt well enough to the new lifestyle. Needless to say, Mera was no help at all. Not even in moving with us to the other state to transport Angie's stuff, but better that way. Well, she gets upset later if Mera breaks something or touches something she shouldn't have. And in less than 2 months, my little girl was already far away from me. It was then that we agreed that the next time I went to visit her, it would be with plane tickets in between, because traveling a whole day by car was not the most economical. And while there was many tears involved, I knew it was for her growth. Mera did not see it that way. She saw it simply as finally getting rid of the one who had caused her so much trouble, and he argued with her constantly about this horrible vision that he had of finally, quote, having peace by not being with Angie. Of course, then I would have to make amends for the sake of our marital status, so I offered to go to a couple of therapy sessions. Why? Well, I wanted to make amends, but it was somewhat complicated due to everyone's desperate schedules at work, so it was always something difficult. I've been in touch since then with Angie, who tells me every so often about her college updates, and it's nice to think that despite everything, she still has a space for her old goofy dad. Update number 1. Wow. I've been off this platform for so long now that it seems unreal. Everything that's happened since. Let me go into it. I feel like I have to explain a lifetime all over again, but here it goes. Things have been going pretty well. My relationship with my two special girls is the best, as long as they're not in the same space together. Angie's been in college for almost 3 years, and that's been doing great. She even had a boyfriend for a while, but he went to Europe, and well, very sad story to tell around here. On the other hand, with Mera, everything went smoothly since together we started our own little e-commerce venture, which bore fruit faster than we thought. The relationship between them, the central focus of the whole topic for which I started writing this text to begin with, has been, basically the same. I see Angie only during Christmas seasons, and that's when I get to enjoy being with her because Mera usually spends the holidays with her side of the family. Well, everyone can come to criticize this kind of behavior as it was, what has kept our family, our relationship, and our living together. Mostly between her and Angie afloat. If I were to object, it would be worse for me, so why hurt something that works so well and doesn't hurt anyone? Of course, at first, Mera wanted to have this holiday for herself too. But she admitted that she, quote, has had me all, year long, so she might as well let me be with my daughter during those days. All that aside, the truth is that the two of them have evolved as people, and Angie has shown me how incredibly mature she is, and Mera, she's still the business shark I fell in love with. Indirectly, if it had not been for her, I don't think I would have been able to afford my daughter's college, for which I have a lot to thank her for. I've been asked on occasion if I worry that this tension between the two of them might explode at some point, but I always tell them that it's a latent fear. But I won't dwell on it every day, otherwise I'll go on a rampage. As long as they understand each other's space, it's all good. Besides, I feel deep inside me that it's a passing thing and they'll eventually get tired of it. For example, Mera has a sister with whom she's always fought with. She told me that day and that night they used to fight over the most absurd things, but once the sister went to live away from home, every time they met again, they were teddy bears with each other. Sometimes you just need a break from people to start appreciating them. Or, as they say, you can't force two people to be together. Although, the way things are going, my little girl may be going to become independent soon after graduation, so living together under the same roof won't be necessary. Update number 2. It fills me with regret to say this, but I have disappointed Angie in a way that I feel I will never forgive myself, and all because of my love and concern for Mera. As it turns out, Angie was about to graduate, having already graduated with honors, and I was unable to attend her ceremony, which we had been talking about for days. We've been planning it from the close to the stay, and I just really can't explain the sleepless nights I spent talking to a super excited Angie about the event so that everything would have the worst possible outcome. I'll tell you what the plan was. As we said, we weren't going on tedious trips around the country, as it would waste our time and resources, so we would go by plane. Flights in our city are terribly expensive, but Angie decided to discover a little hack, which was to go to our neighboring state, which has one of the largest airports in the country, which is almost an entire city. There were much cheaper flights there, and, when I say much cheaper, I mean less than half the original price. So we could go there in the most relaxed way, driving only about 3 hours, and I speak in plural because despite everything, Mera also wanted to go. The truth is that I think she and Angie smoothed things out, and I did not even notice, because when we started talking about it, neither Angie complained nor Mera minded saying that she would leave work for a few days to take this as a, quote, mini vacation. And I even thought it wasn't a bad idea to have something for the first time as a family, like a trip to the pool or a nice restaurant. After all, I was going to save a lot on the flight so we could treat ourselves, and since the girls now, quote, tolerate each other, what could go wrong? Well, nothing could go wrong. I say this because something terrible has happened. We left early that day, got ready, and drove to the airport. Strangely enough, the flight was delayed, and we were told that we would be leaving 2 hours later. We were told that if we did not leave by then, there would be refunds, but that wasn't the idea either. It was the longest 2 hours ever, and I got bored even though there were so many stores around. Mera wanted to see them, but I told her to stay by my side so we could watch for, when they call for the flight. The place was huge and it was easy to get lost in it, but I guess my words were not enough for her because when I closed my eyes to take a little sleep, she was gone from my sight, causing panic and more because of the time. I remember it was only 5 minutes to 2 hours and had fallen asleep at the worst possible time. Mera ended up being like a little girl because I could not find her anywhere. And to top it off, she had left me with her purse, where her cell phone was. I heard the call to board the plane and I kept talking to everyone at the airport, asking them if they've seen her. I even asked a group of teenagers hanging around, and they told me they saw a woman of her description on the other side of the site. I had to run to that place, ignoring if they told me that if we didn't board at that precise moment, we would not be able to take another flight till the next day, since the reservations were full and the next flight available would be in 4 days. And Angie and her graduation is just a day later, and to top it off, the state where we discovered the cheap flights was further away from where she was, so it would have taken us more than a day non-stop to get to her by car. I was on the verge of tears because at that time I wasn't thinking about the trip but where my wife was. Mera was in a store, actually on the other side of the airport, crying her eyes out, and when she saw me, she ran to hug me. I remember that some people even applauded, thinking it was a movie scene reunion, but nothing further from the truth. I asked her what happened, and she told me that she's gotten lost in the vastness of the airport, as there were so many stores and people that she did not remember which platform we were on. Of course, I wanted to be angry with her. That is, I thought something bad had happened to her, that she had been called, or even worse case, kidnapped. But no, it was something so simple as getting lost. Some people helped her and told her where the area was that she needed to return to, but she was panicked to death, so she did not coordinate well to get back to me, and just like a movie, we ended up watching our plane take off through the glass. Well, I tried to talk Angie about it. I tried to come up with just a bunch of solutions to the point where I felt it was in the dark. But for every new answer I said, I ended up with a reprimand from Angie, who told me to forget the whole thing, and the best thing to do was to go home on the way back. We did not touch much on the surface of Mera, because I knew that if I brought her up and blamed her, Angie would probably not talk to me anymore, saying that I gave priority to my wife before her, and thus fulfilled her suspicions that she was living in the world of the evil stepmother. Meanwhile, Mera felt bad about it. Contrary to what anyone might think, she felt terrible about the whole situation. Really. Crying throughout the trip, and she went as far as to tell me, things ranging from that she thought I would leave without her, saying that she even deserved it, and even that she wanted to separate from me because I was too much for her. That did not make me feel so good, and I told her that these were things that happen and that we cannot control everything. So we ended up going back to the house quietly, while at any moment I could receive some messages from Angie telling me anything, but no, something worse happened. I didn't receive anything. It wasn't until she posted the graduation pictures that I was able to talk to her, congratulating her, but she was not in the best mood. Mera was very consoling and told me that she would try to do whatever was necessary to make up for it. I told her not to worry, but she even suggested talking to Angie herself, but I just told her to desist since that was almost a confirmed proof that the situation would get worse. Well, and here we are at this point where not only was I between a rock and a hard place, but I got the sword, and now the sword won't talk to me. So, in effect, I brought this to myself. I felt that it was no one else's fault, but these things are out of our hands sometimes, and we tried as hard as we could to get the flight on time, and I even gave alternatives. At least I did something. But as my grandmother used to say, sometimes things happen for a reason, and maybe it would have been better not to go. I'm seriously holding on to that thought at least. Update number 3. I'll give one piece of advice to all the parents out there, no matter what happens, the people you meet or the situations you get involved in. Always, and I mean always, put your children first. Always, no matter what, I say this because for once I was about to do the opposite and let all this text, everything I've written above, be a recording of everything you should not do with your children. Wow. Since I was, even for half a second, about to leave my baby girl in the most selfish way possible, I feel like leaving this story up here, but not before telling you what happened. Based on the last update, you'll understand that I did not go to Angie's graduation. Well, sometimes later I went to visit her and we smoothed things over. She told me that she would be residing in the city as she found a fairly profitable job, and I showered her with compliments and support, feeling that my daughter was in a better position than I was at her age. Not that I would say that having her was a bad thing, but that I was able to achieve my goal that she would have a better life. After that, there were a lot of tears and the promise that she would find a good man when she got married. All of that was, very nice experience. However, time passed and something happened. It started some kind of bad flu in her town, and I don't think I ever mentioned it, but she had some health issues. When she was a kid, that almost caused her to miss a whole year in school. She told me that many people were already cured, but that she still had many symptoms, and that she had a lot of weakness in her body. Well, this alerted me because she lives alone, and all her friends and acquaintances are in their own little world, so it's up to me to go to her, The thing is that I told Mera about it, and that's when the problem started. First, she told me that we had to take care of business and that we could not stop at the moment, as I'm also a co-owner. And I know that what she said was not entirely correct. We work with another friend who does the bookkeeping, and he has on occasion helped us with a few things. He knows Angie and understands that if something like that happens, I should be with her to take care of her. That was my first signal with Mera. Red flag. Then I told her I would take the vacation I accumulated, but she told me that I didn't have any. Well, I told her that by not attending Angie's graduation week, I was still working as usual, so as I was owed. Yep, a second red flag. And she even got to the point of seeking to get sick. Yes, just as you're reading it, she spent a rainy day in a skirt, shopping, when I had specifically told her it was going to rain. So she, quote, magically got sick as well and said to me, and I'll quote verbatim, "I need you to stay and take care of me too. Can't she come here instead?" And that was the straw that broke the camel's back. She knew that Angie was about to be admitted to the hospital and came to the grace of making herself sick, so I would take care of her. Out of the blue, she said that in such a case, she would go with me. I told her no, that she could stay home, alone. We had a strong argument after that, but I knew that if I did not go immediately to the airport, I would not go that day. It was like a race against the clock, and I had to restrain my desire to leave Mera right then and there. We arrived at the airport, and you won't believe it. It was like holding a little child in my arms. She was complaining about everything, about her discomfort, that she was thirsty, that she wanted to go to the bathroom, anything to get me not to go, seeming as if she wanted to make me break my patience and try to get me to yell at her or something. The worst part was, she was succeeding. So it would have been lowering myself to her level. However, dear readers, she got to the point where she was being such a brat that I said in a low-tone voice, "You know what? Leave me alone." Turned around and went to the platform to get in, and to this day, Angie won't believe it, I finally did that. She just tugged on my shirt sleeve, and believe me when I tell you, she did a tantrum in the middle of the airport, and all the people stared at us as she screamed that I was abandoning her and other nonsense. It reminded me of those videos on the internet about people filmed in the middle of a hard-to-understand fit of rage. So much so that even an airport guard came to us asking what the heck is going on. I was just lucky Mera was distracted by her tantrum that I took the opportunity to bounce, while she kept yelling at me that she would separate. As I found out later, since I left on the plane without looking back, not caring what that woman might have done to our house when she went back, the matter escalated to the police, who asked her to leave the place, but she continued hurling rude words at everybody watching. This led to her being taken away and arrested on charges of disrespect for authority. Disrespect for public spaces and resisting. She used me for her phone call, but all I told her was that I would not pay her bail. It was then that I could understand that the house would be fine, as she would not even be there, and my disengagement from Mera had an effect from the very first moment when, on the plane, I only heard the sound of silence. I arrived with Angie and took care of her for as long as necessary, which was about 2 intense weeks, but I feel that the news that Mera and I were going to separate made her feel better physically. Power of vibes, am I right? We had to go through a whole process of Mera being detained, but I did that later when I was already back, and I thought it would make her think a little bit, but it caused the opposite effect. She ended up upset with me, and said she did not want to see me anymore in her life, and so much so that she left me the business but fought for the house. She ended up super frustrated, and since then Angie could not be happier. We talked about spending the next Christmas somewhere else for a change. And she says that hopefully she'll find me a lady, although I'm not interested in that. I already have my special girl, and she's the only one I care about now. Well, guys, this story had some very interesting comments to it. First of all, one of the comments I said mentioned how OP went too far by not bailing out his wife, who just made an absolute rage of herself in the middle of the airport, and to be fair, I don't blame OP for making that decision, but I do want to know your thoughts, guys. What would you have done if you were in OP's unique position and your daughter was sick, and then your wife was just acting like this? Let me know in the comment section down below what exactly you would do. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate stories every single day. I hope you guys enjoyed today's story. I have another one for you tomorrow, so stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button. I'll see you tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.